Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be able to record my sermon for the Shabbat so that those of you who are not here with me in the synagogue on Shabbat can enjoy and can learn with me. I want to talk about the single greatest collective failure of leadership in the Torah. The story of the spies, it's not so well known, but 10 of the spies that Moses had sent to survey the land and return with a good report. Instead, return with a report that demoralizes the people. The spies that Moses had sent convinced the entire nation, all of the Jews, all of the Israelites, that the advance to the land of Israel was doomed and that Moses had misled them by taking them out of Egypt. Hysteria consumes the nation. They demand a new leader that would return them to Egypt. Moses. Moses is an incredible symbol of leadership just because of his humility. But Moses does something that's uncharacteristic. He chastises the nation severely. He tells them that God said that we would take over the land. And now it's not going to be you. They would not enter the land. You're going to roam the wilderness for 40 years, and only your children meaning anyone who was younger than 20 at the time, would actually enter the promised land. Now, this part of the story is relatively known. What's often overlooked is a story that is followed, and there's actually three rebellions. One rebellion I spoke about with the Maapilim last week. I'm going to talk about it again in case you didn't hear that sermon. But the other two, I don't think are as well known. So, two of those rebellions are actually in the last week's portion of Shlach, and the third is in this week's portion of Korach. The implication behind the chronology of these events seem clear. All three scenes of mutiny were a response to the new and the harsh reality of a nation that is destined to wander for 4 decades in the desert. So I'll tell you again about the first rebellion. We spoke about it in great length. I encourage you to spend some time and watch my sermon last week on the Maapilim. I'm not going to focus on it too much now. So the first rebellion happens immediately the morning after Moses gives them the news that they're not going to enter the land. There's this group known as the Maapilim, the defiant ones. We don't know exactly how many there were, but seems to be that there was a sizable group. And they assemble and they decide that they're going to go to the Holy Land. They are not going to listen to what God said, that they're not going to go. They're going. They say, we're ready. We are going to ascend to the place that God has spoken. We have sinned. They acknowledge the issue, they acknowledge the problem, and we are going. But Moses refuses to go along with them. He says, why do you transgress the word of God? It will not succeed. Do not ascend, for God is not in your midst, and you will be smitten before your enemies. But they disobeyed. They are determined to enter and to conquer the promised land. And so what do? They ascend the mountaintop. And while the ark of God's covenant and Moses did not move from the camp, it was an ill-advised move, and they were struck down. The second rebellion is recorded just a few verses later. A very interesting story that, again, is not well known, but we do know the children of the person who committed this crime. So everyone's in the desert, and there's an apparent reference to the fact that the Jews were to remain in the desert a long time, they found a man chopping wood on Shabbat. Now, let's talk about this a second. The day of rest, the Shabbat, has been held sacred by the Israelites even before they left Egypt. So this is the idea of the laws of Shabbat and celebrating Shabbat is not new. Later, it was in the Ten Commandments. It's commandment number 4 of the top 10 that God says that you shall, labor for 6 days, and on the seventh day you shall rest. It was one of the commandments that was heard by the entire nation from God directly at Mount Sinai. It encapsulates the core Jewish belief that the cosmos was fashioned by a creator with purpose and love, and that one day a week we need to cease the rat race and pay tribute to the mystery, to the grandeur, to the purpose of creation. It was also a sign of the covenant between God and his people. God sharing God's day, his day, with the rest of his people. The Shabbat was a testimony, and still is for us, a testimony to the special covenant with Israel. And this fellow defiantly chose to reject the Shabbat and what it represented. And he was put to death. His name was Salafchad. We're going to find out about the daughters. You may have heard of the daughters of Salafchad. I'm not going to talk about it now, but just to give you that reference. Now, the third episode is in this week's Torah portion, the portion of Korach. And this happens right after the episode of the spies and right after these two rebellions. Korach, who is he? He's a Levite. He's the first cousin of Moses and Aaron. He stages a rebellion against Moses and Aaron. He says the entire community is holy and God is within us. Why do you exalt yourself above the community of God? Why are you above the law? Korach is the first person to contest the leadership of Moses, to contest the authority of Moses. He brings together, assembles 250 prominent figures in the community to join the mutiny. And they too meet a tragic end. What I want to talk about today is what is the meaning behind these 3 ill-conceived revolts. They represent 3 reactions to the divine edict that the Jews are going to remain in the desert for 40 years. The 3 uprisings, at first glance, I would say they're understandable. Frustrated by their reality, searching for a way out of the quagmire, they attempt to find alternatives. And the revolts came in 3 forms. Some said, God doesn't want us to go. We're going to go up to Israel without the guidance of God and the Torah. There's no longer a need for the divine cloud, for the clouds of glory. There's no longer a need for the Torah's ark to serve as the guiding force of Jewish history. The Jewish nation, the Jewish people, they should recast their identity as a free nation, not under God, and forge its destiny in complete autonomy, divorced of the Torah. That was their idea. We don't need the Torah. The second, represented by this wood chopper, the second denies God's existence, denies Jewish nationhood, which is the main theme of the Shabbat. It was not that the Jews should ascend to their homeland, with or without God, but that there was no distinct Jewish nation. There's no distinct Jewish homeland. If God was irrelevant, he certainly made no covenant with the people. And the very notion of a unique Jewish people was an invention as far as he was concerned. The famous Midrash says that every day of the week had a partner. I love this Midrash. Sunday was paired with Monday, and Tuesday was paired with Wednesday, and Thursday was paired with Friday. And Shabbat goes to God and complains of its loneliness and says, God, I'm lonely. I don't have a partner. And God smiles and says, I also have a people alone. Let me pair you two together. And so Shabbat and the Jews enter into a marriage. The denial of Shabbat was a denial of Jewish nationhood. And the third group, what do? They direct their wrath on the spiritual leadership of Moses and Aaron, the teacher and the high priest. Korach and his men accuse them of nepotism. If we can get rid of them, our future may be brighter. What I think is fascinating about these three responses to the story of the spies is that they repeated themselves throughout Jewish history, and they're still happening today. I'll explain like this. As the Jewish exile continued for so long, our people felt trapped in a seemingly endless wilderness of anti-Jewish hatred, of pogroms, of persecution, of bigotry, of savage suffering. Three divergent paths emerged in the Jewish world: enlightenment, the Maapilim; secularization, the woodchopper; and secular Zionism, Korach. And reforms and changes in the Jewish religion. So one response, replicating the woodchopper in our portion, he felt compelled to bid farewell to God, to bid farewell to the Jewish nation. They would chop up all the sacred beliefs and traditions of the Jewish people. Sabbath would become a semi-regular day. And Jewish nationhood, it's an obstacle in the progress. The walls of segregation crumbled with the French Revolution and the Age of Enlightenment. Many Jews voted with their feet, and they seized the opportunity to dispose of the burden of Jewish identity that they felt plagued them for so long. Voltaire replaced Moses. Kant and Nietzsche replaced the Talmud. German nationalism or Russian socialism became the new identity. In the mid 19th century, 40% of the Jews of Berlin were completely assimilated and completely secular. In America, over 1 million Jews assimilated between the years of 1840 and 1930 alone, just to give you an idea of how prevalent this idea was. Jews felt that the modern world had at last given them a way out of the wilderness. And if they would only get rid of Shabbat, if they would only get rid of tradition, if they would only get rid of all of what Judaism represents, the notion that they had a unique and singular covenant with the creator of the universe didn't fit this modern narrative. A clarifying example was the French Revolution's formal emancipation of the Jews. There was I believe in 1789, there was a Revolutionary Assembly member, and he said, and this was exactly indicative of what was going on. He said, for the Jews as individuals, everything. As a people, nothing. For the Jews as individuals, everything. As a people, nothing. The response for nearly a century was smashed into smithereens by the 1894 Dreyfus Affair. For over a century, it was as happy as a Jew in France. And then the Dreyfus Affair. France was riven by the fabricated trial for the treachery of a Jewish captain and a wave of anti-Jewish hatred that astounded our people. But this was one way. And for some today, they still see it like this. I'll let you draw the parallel. Another segment of our people, like the Maapilim, they decided that it was time to grant the Jewish people a national identity. They saw Zionism, not socialism, as their future. This was the way out of the wilderness. The founding fathers of Zionism, at least many of them, they didn't wish to abandon Jewish identity completely, but just to replace Judaism with nationalism. The new course of Jewish history didn't require God and the Torah to lead the way. It required a strong national homeland. Herzl's historic, Judenstaat, the Jewish State Manifesto. It aspired to create a new definition of Jewish nationhood. And finally, the modern era has also seen a mutiny against Torat Moshe, against the institution of halacha, of Jewish law, that's articulated by Moses in the Torah and passed down orally from Moses throughout the generation. Many Jews, some with noble intentions, replicated Korach's outcry. The entire community is holy. They felt and feel that the advent of the modern world called them out to cut and to paste and to edit the Torah according to the sensibilities and the climate of the age. Why do you have to listen to Moses? Who gave the rabbis in the Talmud their power? I am also holy. I also matter. God is in me too. This is the Korach story. I feel this is the new way Judaism should be practiced. Only a new version of Judaism is going to be acceptable in this modern age. Technology, all these things going on. Judaism doesn't know about technology. As a result of that, new denominations were formed. New definitions of Judaism were created. I know this is going to shock you because a lot of people don't know this, but 300 years ago, all Jews practiced their religion the same way for the most part. Very, very few exceptions to it. There were a couple of times throughout Jewish history that there were little tiny factions of people who tried to make their own way. But 300 years ago, very little. And that's why even today in Europe, in the Sephardic communities, you really just have one way of celebrating. But today, in the Western world, in the Ashkenazi community, the question is always, what type of Jew are you? It really bothers me. What do you mean, what type of Jew are you? Are you an Orthodox? Are you conservative? Everyone's trying to box me in. Everyone's trying to tell me, well, this way you have to be this. No, you're this, you're that. Are you Reform? Are you a Reconstructionist? Are you ultra-Orthodox? Again, there were different types of Jews in earlier times. But the definition of Judaism was always uniform. It was always universal. This idea of being a Reform or Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox or conservative, it's new. These three volcanoes transformed the Jewish world of the 18th and the 19th and the 20th centuries. In 1902, a special soul was born in a small city in Ukraine. Now, at this point, it is estimated that half of the Jewish people had abandoned the Jewish faith. had abandoned Jewish practice in search of a newer, better future. Within 2 decades, the First World War and the Bolshevik Revolution would change the map of Europe and the living condition for millions of Jews. Within 5 decades, the Holocaust began. In the country where the Jews had assimilated most successfully and mainstreamed remarkably well, the Holocaust would wipe out a third of our people. 3 years after Auschwitz, in 1948, Israel would be born. 2 years afterwards, 1950, 51, this young man, at the age of 48 or 49, would assume the leadership of a small Hasidic group in Brooklyn, the Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson. The Rebbe's 30th yahrzeit is going to be commemorated this Tuesday, this Monday night and Tuesday, the 3rd of Tammuz, July 9th. This Rebbe, the Rebbe, took a long, hard, and deep look at a world gone up in smoke and ashes. On the one hand, while confronting a deep spiritual crisis on the other, he set out on a courageous mission to re-embrace, to unify all the segments of the Jewish people, to help redirect their course out of the wilderness, out of exile, towards a spiritual and physical promised land. Together with other great spiritual and intellectual giants in the Jewish world, the Rebbe set forth to rebuild a shattered Jewish world. His message was at once simple and profound. Rather than feeling encumbered by Jewish faith, by Jewish heritage, our people needed to be shown how. To the contrary, their most powerful ambitions could be achieved most successfully through a strong and powerful Jewish identity, rooted in the eternal values of Sinai. The Rebbe lovingly spoke to the hearts and minds behind all three revolts. You want to become universal? You want to become part of the larger society? You want to get out of your cocoon and have a real impact on the larger human conversation? The more you will be etched in your distinct Jewishness, the deeper and broader your impact will reach. That's what the Rebbe taught. It's like with love. The more you love your family, the more you can love other people outside your family. Or like the shofar. If you blow the shofar from the narrow side, your voice will resonate far and wide. But if you blow it from the broad side, no voice will be heard. If you forfeit your identity for a universal identity, no voice will emerge. You will have nothing. Something, a little silver lining after the terrible, terrible tragedy of October 7th. The aftermath revealed to all of us that a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. So many good-hearted, universal Jews believed that at last we had integrated. The world has come to love us. They have been shocked to see how even if we try to escape our unique Jewish identity, it's futile. The world knows the truth. The world knows this. The world knows that our job is to change the world through Torah and mitzvot. And escaping this truth is like escaping your DNA. So many people I know lost their entire friends group over October 7th. There's been a real truth that's emerged. I want to take a moment to really feel that the pain and suffering that so many Jews have been going through during this time, especially Jews in Israel, but also Jews in the diaspora who have really, people who they thought were their friends, they've lost them. People they thought had their back, who they knew, friendships and relationships for years, relationships. People come and tell me that he just doesn't understand me. He doesn't get it. There's been a huge shift. To the group dedicated to Israel, the Rebbe said this: you want our people to have a strong national identity. You want them to feel confident that they're not occupiers, that they're not thieves occupying another nation's territory. You want them to feel deeply connected to their homeland and not feel apologetic about their existence in Israel? Do you want them to stop apologizing for Jews having the right to own one land on the entire planet and crush every attempt to endanger even one person? Then do not divorce Israel from the ark of the Torah. Do not climb the mountain without God in your midst. The Rebbe always taught that only when we link up the state of Israel with the holiness of Israel will we respect ourselves, and the world will respect us too. We need to link up the state of Israel with the holiness of Israel. No, we didn't take Madagascar. No, we didn't take Uganda because that's not our land. This is our land. When we respect ourselves, the world will respect us too. When we know and believe wholeheartedly this truth, the world will also. To the third group, who wish to create new versions of Judaism. Maybe they want to make it more appealing to the young, to the modern Jew. The Rebbe's message was your intentions may be noble, but you lack both belief in the integrity of our youth and in the power of the Torah. You want to inspire the youth? Don't give them a watered down Judaism. Give them the full truth. They want to be challenged. And they're capable of real devotion, of real growth. Don't underestimate their potential. And nor should you underestimate the eternal relevance of a manual written by a creator, by the creator of mankind. Back in the 1950s, the late Jewish American novelist Herman Wouk, if you ever read his book, This Is My God, it's a beautiful book. He once asked the Rebbe, he said, do you really believe that you can tell young American Jews what to do? The Rebbe smiled and responded, the American youth can't be told anything, but they can be explained to do everything. The Rebbe, together with other great Jewish leaders and teachers, began to change the vocabulary in the Jewish world. The shift began. And over the following decades, millions of people would rediscover the infinite truths of Judaism and the infinite radiance of their Jewish soul. The Rebbe's message, though, went one step deeper. The Rebbe turned to all three groups and declared, you and we deserve much more and much better than what you opt for. We're all annoyed and frustrated with this long, this arduous, this torturous, this bitter exile. Don't sell yourself cheap. Don't settle for a superficial Messiah. The great test of our generation, the Rebbe once said, was our temptation to settle for all forms of false messiahs to numb our pain. We're not thinking big enough, the Rebbe said. The fact that Jews can live in their ancient homeland is an awesome miracle. The fact that Jews can and must protect themselves unapologetically is our most sacred duty. And the fact that we have integrated and reached success in every facet of secular life is a blessing. Yet we have not endured 2,000 years of suffering just to be able to drink a coffee in Dizengoff or eat a falafel on Ben Yehuda. We have not endured millennia of blood and tears just to reach the highest echelons of Hollywood, of Wall Street, of Washington. We have not endured Auschwitz and Treblinka and Dachau just to raise a flag and have our own Air Force, like 191 other countries. We have not sacrificed for millennia just to be able to feel accepted by the CNN or the New York Times. The sum total of our entire blood-drenched history that the UN stops condemning us for want to breathe, we need and we yearn for something greater. The Rebbe spoke about this idea of Mashiach, which has been embedded in Jewish thought for a long time, though it's been changed and in people's minds because we are affected by living in a Christian world. This is not the Christian version of Messiah. This is the Jewish version of Mashiach. It's the revolution that will transform the world and bring the divine presence into our cosmos. That's what we yearn for. An era when the earth will be filled with divine awareness like the waters cover the sea. The Rebbe in 1956 wrote a letter to the second president of Israel. His name was Yitzchak Ben Tzvi. It's one of the most beautiful letters, but I'm gonna read for you here. Give me a second. Here, I'm gonna read for you a little excerpt of that letter. The Rebbe writes to him, "From the day I went to kindergarten, and even earlier, I began to weave in my imagination the picture of the future redemption, the liberation of the Jewish people from its last exile, a redemption of such magnitude that will allow us to understand the purpose of the pain of exile, the horrific decrees, and the exterminations." Yeah, we're looking for something so gigantic. We're looking for something so unprecedented and mind boggling that it will justify everything that we've been through. A type of redemption that will allow us to finally say, now I get it. And until we reach that point, let us not delude ourselves into believing that we've achieved real success. Let us not settle for less. We want the best and the brightest during the last days of exile. We want and we need to fight for it. When the entire purpose of creation will be fulfilled, when the divine infinity will fill our entire consciousness, and an innate harmony of all existence will come to the fore. This, there's no greater way that we can honor. There's no greater way that we can show appreciation. It's unbelievable that it's 30 years. 30 years. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable that it's 30 years. And I think to now with everything that we're going through, everything the world is going through, with all the turmoil, to be able to focus on the Rebbe's dream of not settling for less. The Rebbe's dream of, if you know a little something, teach it to someone else. Of radical positivity. When the whole world is negative, be positive. The Rebbe's dream of seeing a world that's peaceful and not worrying about the bigger picture, worrying about yourself, your world. Let your world be a peaceful world. Let your interactions be beautiful. Let your interactions be special. Make your world a Mashiach world. Make your world a world that is full of peace. Oh, everyone else around? Everyone else around, yes. And yes, individually, one by one by one by one. The late Rabbi Jonathan Sachs said it so beautifully. As Hitler hunted the Jews in hate, the Rebbe hunted the Jews in love. It's so beautiful. We live in an amazing time. We live in a time that you and I, simple people, we have the ability to create change in the world. And we have the ability to do that by starting with ourselves. And then those around us, our family, our friends, and one by one, making that change. And that's the Rebbe's legacy. Hashem should bless us all. This coming Tuesday morning, I will be visiting the Rebbe's grave and praying and asking for blessings. If you want to send me a letter that I can send, that I can bring with me, it would be my honor. If you have a name or someone that you want to send me that I can pray for, it would be my honor to pray for you. And Hashem should bless us, all of us, that we should be able to truly, truly be taken out of this terrible exile, and we should truly enter a world of peace. And may it be even before Tuesday, before Gimel Tammuz. May it be today. I wish you a beautiful week. A Shabbat Shalom.